Walter never spoke about the fire. Not to Noah, not to the therapist, not even to himself. But every time he reached down to brush the scar on the dog's flank, his eyes would drift, not to the present, but to the hallway where two men never walked out. And today, when the dog refused to enter a room full of mirrors, Walter finally said something. Something that would start the healing. For them both. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move, you please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Autumn came early to Aspen Ridge, Montana. The air was brisk, tinged with wood smoke and dry leaves, and the wide valley between the pine-covered hills held the kind of stillness that only mountain towns knew. That morning, gray clouds hung low over the rooftops like wool blankets, and a fine mist clung to the windows of the old Community Grange Hall where the annual livestock auction was in full swing. Inside, the lights flickered against the stained wooden beams overhead. The floor was scuffed concrete, the benches worn smooth by generations of farmers, ranchers, and townsfolk. The building smelled of dust hay and the lingering scent of wet dog. Walter Langley stood near the back wall, his left leg stiff, his right shoulder bearing the weight of an old Army-issue coat with worn cuffs. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved like someone who'd once been powerful before pain had taught him humility. His white beard was neatly trimmed, though his eyes always seemed distant, like he was still watching smoke curl out of a burning roof. Walter had been a firefighter for 27 years, until a warehouse collapsed during a blaze crushed part of his spine and left him with more scars inside than out. His wife May had passed just a year later, and since then, Walter had lived in a house that felt too quiet, with only his grandson Noah to fill the silence. Noah Langley was 9, with ginger blonde curls that never stayed down and a face freckled like a river stone. His wiry frame moved with quiet purpose, more cautious than most boys his age. He didn't speak much to strangers, but around animals, especially the strays he tried to bring home weekly. His voice softened, and his eyes lit up with a depth that often caught adults off guard. The auctioneer called for attention again, his voice crackling through the microphone. Last item of the day, lot 47. Male golden retriever estimated age 6. No papers, no command retention. Behavioral notes indicate fear-based reactivity. Starting bid $20. There was a pause. Then someone snorted. What are we going to do with a dog that doesn't listen? Use him as a doormat. Laughter rippled through the room. Some muttered things under their breath. Broken skittish, probably dumped by a shelter. Near the front row, a teenage girl covered her nose dramatically. The dog was brought out from a holding crate led by a young assistant who didn't try to hide her unease. Grady was his name, or so the tag read. He was lean too, his ribs showing beneath his sun-bleached golden coat. Patches of fur were matted near the haunches, and a scar ran along his left side as if he'd once scraped against something sharp and hard. His eyes, once a rich amber, were dull, and he moved with the tense uncertainty of a creature that had learned pain came from people. Grady didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply folded himself down in the corner of the auction space head, low eyes fixed on nothing. When the handler tried to tug him forward, Grady resisted not with aggression, but dread. He trembled slightly as if the concrete floor remembered worse things. Noah looked up at his grandfather. "Can I?" he whispered. Walter's brow furrowed. "Noah, he's—" He looked again at the dog. Something caught in his throat. That look. He'd seen it before. On the face of a burned-out firefighter who once sat at the edge of a hospital bed unsure if he was still useful to anyone. A man who wondered if he deserved to be rescued. The auctioneer tapped his gavel impatiently. $20, folks. Anyone who'll go to animal control by sundown otherwise. There was a scraping sound. A small wooden paddle lifted from the back row. I'll take him." Heads turned. The room fell still. Noah stood on his seat holding paddle number 12. His voice was small but steady. "I'll take him," he repeated. Whispers broke out. "Is he serious? That boy just bought a reject dog. Doesn't even know what he's getting into." The auctioneer blinked. "Son, you need an adult." "I'm with him," Walter said, stepping forward. "And I'll pay." The gavel came down. "Sold" to the young man with the big heart. There was a smattering of sarcastic applause. Some looked amused, a few looked embarrassed. Walter signed the release form in silence. As he did, a thin woman in her 40s approached. She wore an oversized tan hoodie with the logo of a veterinary clinic, her brown hair tucked into a frayed beanie. This was Sarah Tisdale, a local vet known for her brusque manner and a reputation for never turning away a lost animal. Once a hopeful young intern in Portland, a tragic misdiagnosis that led to a euthanized family pet had shattered her confidence. She'd moved to Aspen Ridge to start over, trading prestige for quiet work and redemption. She glanced at the old man and the boy. "You're taking Grady, yes," Walter said. "Then you should know he was brought in last month. Found tied behind a service station outside of town. He doesn't eat much, doesn't sleep much. Flinches at touch. No chip, no history we could trace, and he's been on the youth list for 2 weeks." Walter met her eyes. "We'll figure it out." She didn't smile, but she nodded. "He deserves a quiet place. Somewhere with trees. Not another cage." Walter took the leash. Grady didn't move. Noah crouched down on the dusty floor. "It's okay," he murmured. "You don't have to come. But if you want to, we have soup at home. Grandpa's not bad at grilled cheese either." Grady's ears twitched, just slightly. The next morning in Aspen Ridge was colder than the one before. Frost had laced itself over the porch railing, and the pine trees beyond the backyard stood motionless under a pewter sky. The old farmhouse that Walter Langley had lived in since 1972 creaked faintly as it warmed under the first rays of a reluctant sun. Inside, the house smelled of coffee, old wood, and flannel. Grady lay curled in the farthest corner of the mudroom, a transitional space between the outside world and the home within. He hadn't touched the water bowl placed near the back wall. The roast chicken scraps Noah had left before going to bed still sat untouched. His eyes, though open, stayed low-locked on the floor, as if awaiting something, an order, a blow, a memory. Noah had woken up early. He crept quietly, not wanting to spook Grady, and brought a thick plaid blanket one his mom had kept in the RV they used to camp in every fall. The fabric still smelled faintly of cedar smoke and marshmallows the past woven into its threads. Noah placed it on the floor and sat, cross-legged, not close, just near enough that his presence could be felt. "Hey," he began, voice low and even. "This is where we eat oatmeal that always sticks to the pot, and Grandpa says my cereal is too loud." He smiled, glancing once at Grady, who hadn't moved. Outside the mudroom's small window, the wind gently stirred the wind chimes, a set made of old silver spoons and keys that Noah's mom had fashioned years ago. The sound was light, uncertain, like something remembering how to be music. "My school's 5 minutes away," Noah continued. "We read this book about a bear that ran away from home. I think he missed someone." He paused. "I do too." Walter passed occasionally through the hallway but didn't interrupt. He recognized the tone in his grandson's voice. It wasn't about making conversation. It was about making space, offering one in case the dog might need it. At noon, there was a knock on the side door, 2 soft raps followed by a familiar shuffle. Walter opened it to reveal Lucille Carter, the Langleys' neighbor for over 2 decades. She was in her 70s now, though age had never slowed her stride. Lucille stood barely 5'1", wiry and upright, her thick silver braid looped into a knot at the base of her neck. Her skin was sun-dappled, her clothes always in some shade of lavender, and her presence carried the unhurried wisdom of someone who had raised 3 sons, buried one in a war, and never stopped planting daisies every spring. Brought the milk, she said, hoisting a small crate of bottles. And a slice of peach pie I told myself I'd freeze, but didn't. Walter stepped aside. You didn't have to. Of course I did, she said. And Sarah Tisdale told me about that dog. Her voice lowered. They said he flinches when you open a cabinet. Walter nodded toward the mudroom. He's in there. Noah's been talking to him all morning. Lucille's gaze softened. Smart boy. That kind of dog doesn't need commands. He needs someone who'll wait. She bent down with a surprising ease and peeked through the doorway. Her eyes found Grady still frozen in that same corner. She didn't approach. Instead, she spoke softly, almost to herself. My Doodle used to lie just like that. After my son came back from Kandahar, wouldn't leave his door for weeks. Her voice cracked, then steadied. He'd sleep right outside like a sentinel. Nobody trained him to do that. He just knew. Grady's ears flicked at the sound of her voice. Barely, but it was the first reaction he'd made since arriving. Lucille didn't press. She simply placed the crate of milk on the kitchen counter and laid the pie beside it. He might not be ready to come to the table, she said, almost smiling, but he knows the kitchen smells like people who care. After she left, Noah returned to his post near the blanket. Hours passed. He spoke about the trail behind the house where his dad used to hang wind spinners from the trees. About the stars you could see from the roof when the power went out. About how the silence got big sometimes at night, so he left his door cracked, just in case someone might need to come in. Grady watched him now, though, still from the corner of his eye. The shift was subtle, but it was there. A sign that something inside the dog was listening. That evening, as the sky turned a bruised shade of violet and pine shadows grew longer, Walter brought a bowl of gently warmed chicken and rice. No seasoning, just simple food. He placed it in the center of the room, then backed away. Noah didn't say a word. He simply leaned against the wall wrapped in the old blanket and waited. At some point, between the fading wind chimes and the first chirp of crickets, Grady moved. It wasn't fast. His body stayed low to the ground, cautious and slow, like a soldier unsure if the land had been cleared of mines. He sniffed once, then again. Then finally, with deliberate grace, he approached the bowl and began to eat one bite at a time. Noah didn't react. He didn't cheer or gasp or even smile. He only whispered, "It's okay, we're still here." Walter, watching from the kitchen, blinked back something in his eye. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. That night, Noah laid the blanket in the hallway between his room and the mudroom. He didn't ask for Grady to follow. He simply opened his bedroom door, left a trail of words behind like breadcrumbs, and whispered, "You can come if you want." 2 days after Grady's quiet acceptance of food, the sky above Aspen Ridge cleared, revealing pale blue stretched between the tall ridges like freshly pressed linen. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the lace curtains in the kitchen, touching the wooden floors with a honey-colored warmth. Noah sat cross-legged on the living room rug, sorting through the small pile of items that had come home with Grady the leash from the auction, a nearly empty flea treatment box and a canvas duffel that smelled faintly of antiseptic and dust. Grady, still cautious but no longer hiding, lay nearby on a folded quilt. His eyes followed Noah's hands not nervously, but with a quiet animal curiosity that hadn't been there before. It was Walter who had placed the duffel on the floor that morning, his only comment being, "Might be worth looking through." Noah unzipped the bag. Inside were a few wrinkled documents all half torn or water-stained, too damaged to make sense of. But something else slid from between the folded seams, a worn leather collar, its buckle tarnished, and the strap softened by age. Noah picked it up. The tag was scratched but still legible. Buddy, LTX Therapy K9. The moment he said it out loud, Grady's ears pricked. Noah froze, then whispered it again. Buddy. The reaction was unmistakable. Grady lifted his head, his eyes clearer than they'd been since the auction. He didn't stand or approach, but his breathing changed. He blinked slowly like a sleeper stirring from a dream, not quite done with him yet. Walter entered carrying 2 mugs of cocoa, one of which he handed to Noah. He glanced between the boy and the dog, then to the collar in Noah's hand. "What did you say?" Noah showed him the leather strip. Walter took it, his calloused fingers careful, reverent. Buddy, LTX. He paused his mind, working backward through acronyms. LTX, that's shorthand for long-term therapy. I saw something like that in the VA ward after the factory fire in Bozeman. Dogs trained to sit with veterans in crisis housing. Walter looked over at Grady Buddy and something shifted in his expression. He wasn't trained to bite. He was trained to listen. Noah stared wide-eyed. So he helped soldiers. Walter nodded. Yeah, some soldiers don't talk to people, but they'll talk to a dog, especially one that doesn't expect anything back. Grady Buddy shifted slightly, one paw curling under his eyes, still locked on the collar in Walter's hands. That afternoon, Lucille Carter stopped by again, this time with a small potted plant and a book wrapped in brown paper. "I figured your house needed something living that doesn't shed," she said, handing the plant to Noah. "A spider plant. Tough little thing, like you." Noah smiled, his voice more confident now. "We found his real name. It's Buddy." Lucille raised an eyebrow. "Well, I'll be. That makes sense." She sat at the kitchen table, her familiar cardigan wrapped tightly around her small frame. Her fingers fidgeted slightly with the string on the wrapped book. "You know, after my son came home from Afghanistan, he didn't sleep through a night for nearly 2 years," she began. Her voice had that settled tone people get when they've told a story many times, trying to make it feel smaller than it was. "He'd pace. Wouldn't eat with us. Thought every car backfiring was something worse. We tried everything, therapists, medication. Nothing reached him." She looked out the window until they gave him a golden retriever from a therapy program in Ohio, named Cooper. The dog didn't bark, didn't fetch, didn't do tricks, just sat beside him. Every night. Listened like it understood every word he didn't say. Lucille's voice grew softer. "My son said once, 'Mom, I don't have to pretend I'm okay when I talk to him.'" Walter nodded slowly. Sometimes it's not about talking. It's about someone just being there, steady as breath. Lucille handed the book to Noah. This was Cooper's training journal. The handlers who raised him wrote notes in the margins. Might be worth a read. Noah opened it gently. Inside were pages of simple instructions. Sit beside, not in front of. Respond to tone, not command. If patient curls away, do not press. Be still. Be warm. As the sun dipped low that evening, Walter dug through the tool shed behind the house and found an old cedar chest. He dusted it off, brought it into the mudroom, and laid the blanket Noah had first offered, Grady Buddy, inside. A fresh bowl of water, the collar resting on a hook nearby. Buddy stepped inside on his own that night. He didn't lie on the blanket, but he sat beside it, facing the door, as if guarding the space now designated for him. Later, after Noah had gone to bed, Walter sat on the porch steps, a blanket over his shoulders, coffee going lukewarm in his hands. Buddy lay 2 feet away, not touching but present. Walter didn't speak at first, just breathed. Let the silence stretch. Then he murmured almost to himself, I remember when I used to talk to the fire trucks like they could hear me. Thought if I told them the truth, the flames might ease up. Buddy blinked once, slow and steady. Walter chuckled softly. Guess I was waiting for someone to listen too. The old white Ford truck hummed along the cracked road that led to the Aspen Ridge Veterans Hall, a modest building tucked between a closed-down gas station and a thrift store that only opened on Thursdays. The sun filtered through clouds, casting long shadows across the parking lot, and Buddy sat quietly in the back seat, his body upright but tense golden coat gleaming faintly in the light. Walter Langley gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly. Dressed in his cleanest flannel and his fire department jacket, he looked every bit the retired hero, but inside the knots in his stomach were drawn tight. Noah sat beside him, hugging Buddy's old collar against his chest like a relic. The silence in the cab was not heavy, but alert like air before a storm. Walter hadn't set foot inside the Veterans Hall since May's funeral reception. It wasn't that he didn't feel welcome. It was that welcome was harder to accept when you weren't sure you deserved it. But today wasn't about him. Today was about Buddy. They pulled in and parked near the side entrance. Noah climbed out first, holding the door open while Walter clipped the leash onto Buddy's harness. The dog hesitated at the threshold, his paws pausing on the truck's edge, gaze scanning the building with the wary calculation of someone measuring exits. "It's all right, Bud," Walter said quietly. "No alarms here, just some men trying to remember how to breathe." Inside the hall smelled of burnt coffee, old paper, and lemon-scented polish. A bulletin board near the door listed a weekly bingo night and a flyer for a pancake breakfast. The lights flickered gently overhead. There were a dozen or so men gathered, mostly older, some in wheelchairs, others leaning on canes or walkers. They sat in folding chairs around mismatched tables, sipping coffee and speaking in half-voiced sentences. Buddy froze just inside the door. His muscles trembled faintly beneath his coat, and his ears pinned halfway back. He didn't growl, but the tension was visible in every line of his posture. Noah crouched beside him, hand resting lightly near Buddy's paw. "You don't have to go in, okay? You can just watch." Across the room, a man with a curved spine and trembling hands struggled to open a can of soda. He wore a patched army jacket with a faded 101st Airborne patch on the sleeve, and a name tag, Elton Greaves. His right hand shook so badly the can slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor with a metallic thud. The sound made Buddy flinch, but he didn't back up. Instead, he watched. Elton reached down slowly, trying to recover the can, but his fingers wouldn't cooperate. He let out a soft curse and leaned back with a sigh. Hands never came back. "Right," he muttered to no one in particular. Then Buddy moved. Not quickly. Not with any show. Just a calm, deliberate walk across the floor, his steps light, precise. He didn't approach Elton directly, but came to his side, lowered his head, and placed his chin gently on the man's knee. A stillness settled over the room. Elton looked down. His lips trembled. One hand hovered in the air, unsure. Then, with the slow care of someone unsure if they were dreaming, he placed it on Buddy's head. The dog didn't move. Elton closed his eyes. "God," he whispered, "you remember." Tears began to fall, not just his. The silence in the room shifted from discomfort to reverence. Every man present had known someone who hadn't made it home whole. Some of them were still trying to come home themselves. Walter watched his throat thick, his chest tight. Then he heard a chair scrape behind him. A tall woman in a green vest approached, clipboard in hand. She was in her early 40s with tightly coiled dark hair, pulled back into a ponytail, sharp cheekbones, and a demeanor that balanced warmth with no-nonsense efficiency. This was Trina Morales, the new coordinator for the Soldier and Canine Healing Program. Former Navy corpsman, 2 tours in Ramadi, and a reputation for getting things done without raising her voice. "You must be Walter," she said, extending a hand. "And that's Buddy." Walter nodded and shook her hand. "He's impressive," she said, glancing toward the scene with Elton. "That wasn't trained behavior, that was instinct." Walter rubbed the back of his neck. He used to be a therapy dog. Noah found his old collar. Once we called him by the right name, something clicked. Trina's smile softened. "That's more common than you'd think. Some of these dogs lose their handlers or their units, and no one tells them what their new mission is. They need a reason to serve again, just like us." She paused. "We're trying to build something here, a space for healing, mutual, not one-sided. Would you consider bringing Buddy back? Maybe talk to some of the other handlers, even help us train the newer dogs." Walter looked across the room. Buddy now sat beside Elton's chair, alert, but at ease, his presence as grounded as a stone wall. "I'm not much of a joiner," he said. Trina shrugged. "You don't have to join, just show up." Walter didn't answer right away, but when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost thoughtful. "I think he'd like that." After an hour, they left the hall. Buddy walked with measured steps, not as stiff as before. He didn't flinch at the clanging door, and when he climbed into the truck, it was without coaxing. Noah beamed from the back seat. He remembered Grandpa. That was his job. Helping people feel okay again. Walter glanced at the dog through the rearview mirror. Buddy's head rested between the seat's eyes, half-lidded but peaceful. "Yeah," Walter murmured. "And maybe it's our turn to help him remember how to live." The first snow fell in Aspen Ridge a week before Thanksgiving. It wasn't a storm, just a quiet dusting, soft flurries drifting like feathers across rooftops and pine needles frosting the cracked sidewalks and the iron fence around Noah's school. The town had already begun putting up lights, stringing them across telephone poles and storefronts like promises stitched into the sky. Buddy now slept beside Noah's bed, curled on a thick wool rug, his body pressed lightly against the baseboard as if guarding both the room and the dreams within it. The tension that had once coiled under his ribs was gone. He breathed deeply now, not flinching at every creak of the old farmhouse floor or every gust of wind against the window. Noah had changed too. He spoke more easily, walked taller. He no longer avoided eye contact when answering questions in class. But, most notably, he had begun to smile, a quiet, open sort of smile that stayed even when no one was looking. Each morning, Walter drove Noah to school in the old Ford, and Buddy sat in the truck bed wearing his padded service vest, alert but calm. Most of the children had grown used to his presence. A few asked if they could pet him, and Noah always answered with the same firm kindness. "Only if he comes to you first." One cold Tuesday morning, a new student arrived. Her name was Emily Carter, a pale, narrow girl with long sleeves and tired eyes. She was 8, and her mother had died just 2 months earlier in a traffic accident that left her father too shocked to speak for days. Emily now lived with her aunt, who dropped her off every day without much more than a distracted wave. That morning, Emily had barely made it through the classroom door before she froze. Her breath shortened. Her chest heaved. She pressed her hands to her ears as if to block out a sound only she could hear. Children stared. The teacher, Ms. Carver, a tall woman in her 30s, with horn-rimmed glasses and an unflappable voice, moved toward Emily gently, but the girl flinched away, eyes wide with panic. Then Buddy stood up. From the truck bed he had been watching. Noah had seen it too, his ears lifting, his body stiffening, not with fear but intent. Noah opened the truck door. "Go," he said simply. Buddy trotted through the open gate, his steps quiet on the frozen grass. He didn't run. He didn't bark. He simply approached Emily slowly without a sound, his head-low posture open. The children parted like the sea. Buddy sat down 3 feet away from her and waited. Emily's sobs slowed. Her breathing began to settle. She peeked through her fingers, eyes landing on the golden retriever sitting so still it was as if he belonged to the wind. He took a single step forward and gently rested his head on the toe of her boot. And that was it. Emily sank to the ground, arms wrapped around her knees, and whispered something only Buddy heard. He didn't respond. He just leaned closer until his side pressed into her shoulder, like a lighthouse leaning into the storm. From that day, Buddy waited with Noah each morning at school, and with Emily too. In the evenings, Walter began receiving emails. One was from Trina Morales at the Veterans Hall. Would you and Buddy be interested in speaking at the state workshop next month? The topic is Soldiers and Their Silent Guardians. We think your story could make a difference. Another came from the principal of Aspen Ridge Elementary. Mr. Langley, we'd like to formally request Buddy's presence during selected school days. He has provided tremendous comfort to several students, and we believe he could serve in an unofficial support capacity. Walter read the messages out loud at the kitchen table. Noah, who was brushing peanut butter onto a graham cracker for Buddy, grinned. I told you, he said he has a job again. Walter looked over at the dog lying on the braided rug, paws crossed, eyes following every word without blinking. Looks like we all do. Later that week, Lucille Carter stopped by with a pie pear and ginger this time, and stood on the porch while Buddy gently leaned his weight into her shins. He reminds me of Doodle more and more, she said, voice soft as frost. Only Doodle never had to learn twice. This one did. Walter smiled. Maybe some of us need second chances to know what we're really made of. Lucille patted his arm. Well, this town remembers. They've started calling him Buddy again at the diner. Even the mailman brings him bacon from home. One night, Walter sat by the fire, its embers glowing orange behind the iron grate. Noah was asleep upstairs and Buddy was curled beside the rocker, chin resting on Walter's boot. The man reached down, brushing a hand over the dog's broad skull. You came here broken, he murmured. So did he. So did I. Funny how none of us talk much, but somehow we all hear just fine. The dog didn't move, but his tail gave a single thump. That winter, the town of Aspen Ridge would come to know a quiet trio, the boy, the old man, and the golden retriever who never barked, only listened. And in a town that had seen its share of grief, that was enough. Sometimes the greatest healing doesn't come from medicine or words, it comes from presence. From a loyal dog who chooses to sit beside a grieving child. From a grandfather who dares to hope again. From a boy who simply listens. This story reminds us that God often works through quiet moments, through second chances, and through those we least expect, like a once rejected dog who became a town's silent guardian. In our busy lives, it's easy to overlook the quiet ways God shows up. But perhaps the real miracles aren't thunderclaps or lightning bolts. Perhaps they're soft paws on wooden floors, or the steady breath of someone choosing to stay. If you've ever felt broken or like you didn't belong, remember this. God isn't finished with your story. Sometimes the healing comes not with noise, but with presence. And sometimes you're not just being healed, you're part of someone else's miracle too. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Comment below with your thoughts or your own experiences of quiet healing. And if you believe in the power of second chances, type Amen in the comments to bless someone else who might need it today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of God's grace, found not in grand gestures, but in golden fur, gentle hearts, and everyday miracles. May God bless you and all who are searching for healing.